Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of The Bear. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have that opening, which Carmen's on a TV show, and it kind of opens up a little bit about the circumstances with his brother. I like that juxtaposition between the dream he had, and then the next scene is him at one of the Al-Anon meetings where he kind of opened up, because it's he's got all this pressure on him about what taking over the restaurant meant for him, and it's just and I love how he had told that story about who his brother was, and we got a little bit of that in a previous episode. It might be it was episode 6, and I think a lot of that could be applicable to Richie as well, where it's for Carmen, he had no idea his brother was a drug addict because they had fallen so far apart. Growing up, they used to be so tight. In fact, cooking was the thing that brought them together. They wanted to open up a restaurant together. I guess the whole beef thing was something they came up with together, but Mikey always kind of kept him on the outs, and eventually that kind of put a strain on the relationship, because that's why it took Carmen completely by surprise, because for one, he had no idea about his brother's drugs addiction, that he'd even considered suicide. And also what cuts him even deeper, it's there was no words, no letters, no nothing explaining yourself. And the moment he said that, I was the letter. Obviously, I completely forgot about the letter behind the locker. Richie found it and put it back. I was I completely forgot about it. I don't remember if I said, because I remember about the letter and why Richie put it back. I was that was very dickish of him, but we'll get to that later. But I don't know if it clicked in my head that was a suit. I'm fairly sure by then, because I know Richie revealed that in episode 2 about what happened to Mike. But I want to say that was maybe that was episode 3. Maybe it might even been the same episode where he had put the letter back. I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, obviously it's been a couple days between some of these recordings, so I don't remember what my thoughts were about that letter. Did I know it was a suicide letter or what? Because I think at the time I was sure it was for Carmi from Mike, but I didn't know, I knew Richie was I didn't show it to you because I was kind of pissed at you at the time. But either way, my point was, to Carmen, there was no letter, and it's I have no answers. That's always the suckiest thing. It's it's not like having answers is going to make it any better, but at least having your final words, what might have been in your mind, what might have been the thing that mattered to you. Because for Carmen, the sad thing is, so much of who he is, so much of what he's done these past couple years has been for his brother and in spite of his brother all at once. Because his brother wouldn't let him in on the restaurant, kind of cut him out, wouldn't kind of respond to him. It's you know what? I'm going to show you. So he went to the greatest restaurants around, made a name for himself, worked hard till he blood, sweat, and tears into everything until he could get good. But even that wasn't enough to get his brother's attention. So he ended up cutting people out of his life and focusing more and more. Cooking became, for one, it was going to be his language. It's how him and his brother connected, and then it became this complicated sore spot because it's no longer the language him and his brother spoke anymore. But he found, with cooking, hey, I'm good at this. I found something I'm really good at, and it kind of defined him. It became everything to him, because every other aspect of his life, his family, his personal life, specifically things with his brother, it was all so far apart and so away, And it's kind of what was all the point of it? Because everything was for the purposes of trying to show your brother up to a certain extent, show him see, I can do it. Notice me now. And for what? For him to die and never have any resolve. Because who knows how long it had been when they had talked last, when Mike had died, And so it's right, I got left this restaurant, which is already in a shitty position. But for him, it's the restaurant represents everything that he kind of had. It is everything, because it is his connection to his brother. It's that connection he had through food. But it's I don't know what it meant to my brother. Maybe it didn't mean anything at all. That's the thing. Especially now when he looks at the records and just how much of a shithole the place is. Because he even said it himself. He thought by kind of taking over the restaurant, he thought it would fix his dysfunctional family. But it's the years that he that time he spent away, kind of cut off from his family, it's hard to kind of like reattach those connections because he severed them and isolated himself. And so that's why he's been spiraling so much. Like I said, it's just been one thing on top of each other. Mike's death, taking over the restaurant, now having the context of what that meant for him opening up. And I think that speaks volumes where you can open up in front of strangers, and it's a lot easier than opening up around the people. Because I doubt all that he said in that Al-Anon meeting, I doubt he's ever said that to Sugar. I doubt he's ever said that to Richie or anyone around him, because it's a lot easier, because it is that, what was I watching? Oh God. I don't know how much I want to go and get into it. It's a shorthand where you don't have to explain yourself. That's how I'm going to allocate it. I was watching a podcast, and I'm going to talk about it. It was on Trash Tuesday, and it was like the Amanda Knox episode, and she was like, right, people who were like falsely accused of something, and she was like, right, you don't have to explain anything. These are people who understand you. It's kind of like that with Carmen, where it's like, that's why it's easy to open up, because these people aren't going to ask questions. They're going to allow you to say what you need to say, because everyone's got their situation. It's like, our situation isn't exactly yours. Our pain isn't exactly yours, but we're not going to sit here and like, not even just judge you, but we're not going to ask questions. We're not going to poke. We're not going to pry. We're going to let you say what you need to say, because this is supposed to be a safe space for that. So it's that, like I said, that shorthand understanding of, you ain't got to explain nothing to us. You just vent, you say what you need to say, you feel what you need to feel, you know? And especially for Carmen, who says that he couldn't ever ask his sister how she felt because he didn't know how to describe how he felt. And I think now he was finally able to kind of put it in words what he's been holding on for these past couple months. And that, I mean, for however long him and Mike were on the outs, because that feels like that was years. And then you add in like the couple months it's been since Mike died. So going back to the restaurant, trying to piece everything together. Obviously, it's like, right, at this time he hadn't talking. It seems like it's only been like a day since the last episode, so he hasn't talked to Sid, he hasn't talked to Marcus, but he is going to try and repair that. And they've got, well, they're kind of in a crappy spot, because Jimmy's like, yeah, because of chipping away at that debt you owe me, you need to throw this party here, and they kind of just have to accept it because it's the only way they're going to get out of the debt. But because Mike was, Carmen was looking through the books again, and it's like, yeah, there's like all this money he was getting from Jimmy going to some, like, what was it, KBL or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but he was asking Tina about it. But Tina's like, I have no idea what that was about. Even to the point she had even said at one point, yeah, we almost ran out, we ran out of napkins at one point, and I asked Mikey about it, and he was like, what's the point of buying some now, because we won't be able to pay for them next month. And Carmen's like, oh, I guess that was kind of usual for him. But she's like, no, the reason why I took note of it, because it isn't usual for him. So I think it was because that was also Carmen being like, okay, that's how my brother really felt about this restaurant. But Tina's line made it go like, no, it was unusual for him. That's why it stood out. So it's like, right, he wasn't always like that. Like, he did care about this place. I think that gave Carmen a little hope of like, oh, really? Like, but I don't think it's until like everything plays out over the course of the episode that it really hits him, you know? Sadly, like, I like a lot of what he ended up saying at that Al-Anon meeting, and something that Richie said about like, right, my brother was like magnetic. Like, the fact of the matter is he was loud, but he was also very hilarious and annoying. And the fact, I think that's probably why him and Richie got along so well. But it is the thing of, for Carmen, it's like, he was my best friend. Problem was, everyone else thought of him as their best friend as well. So it's almost a thing of, you kind of had to share him, especially how magnetic his personality was. And just, it made that severed relationship of theirs cut that much deeper. So you take all that, and you also have like Sid and Marcus working through their post Carmen stuff, which, you know, just, I love just like the reiteration of like at least 4 times they called him a little bitch because of what he did, which is interesting because Sid ended up tasting Marcus's donut, which off the floor, because it's like, hey, Gary keeps the place clean, but neither one of them knows that Carmen did as well. He never, at least on screen, he never told Marcus that he tasted the donut. So, but Sid was like, no, it was really, really good. She prepared a dish, and she talked a little bit about her culinary history and stuff. How she went to taste food from so many different places, because when she went to school or whatever, she never she never knew a lot of the names that the people were saying. So she was broke at the time. So she ended up spending every bit of money she had to go to all these different places and tasting stuff. And even admitting later on the best food that she ever had was something made by Carmen. And it's like, and even Marcus like, yeah, I figured you'd say that. Because they can both recognize like, oh, he is very skilled. He is really good at what he does not make him any less of a little bitch, you know? So, because even Marcus is like, yeah, most likely we'll go back and we'll kind of fix it up. Or even if we don't, you know, it is what it is. But, you know, it'll just kind of depend on how things play out. And just Sid was going to try and find another place. And then she was like, yeah, but even then that place I work at next will most likely lead to another place. And I'll keep going and going and working at so many different places until I pay off like everything. And I was able to kind of get my credit out of the shithole that it is. Because for her, it's like she felt like she found a good place, a foundational place at Beef, but now that's kind of go kaput, and she knows she's not going to find it. Because it's like, right, if that place is going to end up the way it is, I know every other place I'm going to end up is going to be the same as any other restaurant where it's like you're going to have some douchebag chef yelling at you. So I'm going to run through so many different places until like I can finally clean up my debt and kind of put my life somewhat back on track. So Sid, you know, talked about her goals and her dreams of just like, right, I just want to make food that people can be happy about, food that like makes people feel a certain way. And they talked about this particular place. It was like a Michael Jordan like restaurant place or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's got the best bacon in the world. It's like, yeah, I just want to make the best bacon in the world. Even if it's just second best bacon in the world, you know, I kind of want that. And so at the same time that's going down, shit really hits the fan for Richie and Carmen when Richie ends up knocking a guy out. He hits his head on the counter because they were trying to break up a fight. Now, the guy at the time was still in the ICU, and it was like, fuck. If he dies, it turns into a manslaughter charge. And his one call, Richie didn't call anyone, lawyer or anything like that. I mean, that might have already been he was probably already given like a court-appointed attorney or whatever. We kind of brush over that, but he calls his ex. And he's like, you know, the thing I called your dad, it wasn't okay. I think this is kind of this whole situation. I mean, your entire life was almost like over. Like this was going to be like it. You were already kind of like in a position because the night was already pretty rough because you're like, right, we have all these people here because of the way Mike was running things and we're in Jimmy's debt because we owe him a lot, because of Mike. But also now, like you're reminded of how could I not see what was going on with Mike? I should have handcuffed him to the desk. I knew he was using, but I didn't know he was going to like spiral the way he did. And it's just like, I wish I had done more. It's like, what could you have done? And I don't know, and the thing, it's just that powerlessness and that hopelessness of like, I wish I would have been able to do something. Either way, he's apologizing to Tiff. He's not letting her know about his circumstances. Yeah, just give Ava a big hug for me, and I'm sorry. That's just kind of all I wanted to say. So, because I didn't talk about it, but I want to say, what was it, I believe it was episode 6, where he talked about the fact is that in his ex's phone, he's called Richie Bad News to the point that his daughter thinks that's his actual last name. Because it's like, yeah, every time you call, it's with bad news. So it kind of continuing that thread, he didn't want to call with bad news, so he tried to pretend like everything was okay. It put life in perspective for him. And luckily the guy worked up and it's like, right, turned into an aggravated assault charge, which is like, you know, Richie's thankful for that. And so Carmen ended up paying out he's like our 2-week parachute. I guess like they have money that's meant to kind of keep them like, hey, this is our money we set aside to try and keep us afloat for like 2 weeks. The money we have set up trying to always make sure we're at least okay for the next 2 weeks. Maybe that's kind of what that's supposed to represent. Like he just called it their 2-week parachute. But yeah, he had to spend that on Richie's bell, which even Richie's like, I just want you to know, Carmen, like he's like kind of tearing up and everything, like, because like I said, his life was almost over. Like Richie's the shit talker that he is, but like things got really real in that moment of just like, this could have gone so badly. And so for him, it's like, right, I just need you to know, like, you're all I have. Like he, you know, it's like things are complicated on the family front. He doesn't have Mikey. It's not like him and Sugar are on the best of terms. And it's like, right, Carmen is kind of the only family he's got. He's like, cuz you're the only one I've got. So, and ultimately, he ended up finally giving Carmen the letter. And it's like, what is this? And it's like, I don't know. And Richie's like, And Carmen doesn't blow a gasket because it's like, right, it's implying like, wait, you knew exactly where it was, so you've known. And he's like, and even admits, I didn't give it to you because, and his explanation isn't what I thought it was. I thought it was like, oh, you're just pissed at Carmen. It's like, no, it's like by giving him that thing, because he had an idea of what it might be, but it would mean like finally accepting Mikey being gone. And I think for him, it's just, I kind of have to. Once again, for a while now, he's been the one kind of stuck. And they've been both stuck in their own situations, but they've both been kind of trapped in the past, and it was suffocating them. And I think this was Richie finally taking the steps forward. So Carmen finally reads it, and it was his brother's terms of like that phrase he always said, let it rip, just kind of like whatever's kind of keeping you down, you just kind of push through it, like, you kind of, and I guess you could almost parallel it to him at the Al-Anon meeting, kind of letting it rip there. But all it was on the back, like it wasn't some extensive letter, few words, and then on the back is the family recipe for like the spaghetti, and it's just like, really, that's all this was? But I think it was just kind of what Carmen needed, because I think for him it's like, and he started working on the spaghetti because he was going to make that, he was going to be the one taking over the family meal, and he was going to be like, right, I'm going to do it this today, and he was going to make the spaghetti. And I think for him it's just like, I think that kind of implied in his mind like, hey, like this, it's indicative of what was on his mind, both the restaurant, but also, family, because he had talked about that meal we saw in that episode, in episode 6, he prepared that every Sunday, for the fam. So I just skipped over it, but he did apologize to Marcus, which Marcus was like, no, it's good. It's all good. We're okay. So I'm skipping over some very interesting points too. Like there was a point where I can't remember when it was. It might have been before he got the letter or whatever. Because what pushed Richie to give Carmen a letter was the stove and everything. It was just that moment he had talked about previously with Marcus of, yeah, there's a moment in your mind like let it all burn, because at this point he didn't fully know how much, still didn't really know what the restaurant meant to his brother. So it's like, it might be better if I just let this whole thing burn. It just needs to be burned, and I can kind of just let go and finally be free of everything. But, Gary and Tina ended up putting the fire out, and Richie's kind of slapping him like, are you okay? Because I think for a second he was probably getting worried. It's like, I couldn't do anything for Mikey, but maybe I can do something for you. Like, hey, you got another lease on life. Like, don't be so quick to just stand there. Like I didn't fully notice the signs. I thought he'd be able to bounce back. Let me try and help Carmen out of whatever he's kind of going through. So that's what made him finally give him the letter, because he's like, maybe I can finally move on and accept that Mikey's going, but maybe this can get Carmen out of whatever situation he's in. So he ends up opening up the cans of tomato sauce and finds a stack of money. So I'm like, I still don't fully know what that's all supposed to be representative of. Like, did he borrow all this money for Jimmy? I guess it was always supposed to go, like, maybe he placed some bets or something like that. Because that looks like that. I mean, there was like 20 stacks or something like that, maybe even more. Because there was something like, I think, every can of tomato sauce. Because that's what I had brought up previously. I was like, was he laundering the money or something? Like, oh, I thought, because I knew he was like cooking the books or whatever. Because once again, the whole point that it's like, right, why is he buying these particular cans of sauce? You could buy these for a cheaper price, so it didn't make any sense. Like, Carmen had brought that up earlier in the season, but it's like, right, he was hiding the money in there. Like I said, I just don't fully get, like I said, was he making bets? Was that just the money he owes Jimmy that he was stashing away? But that was indicative of, yes, he cares about this restaurant. It was supposed to be kind of like the whole, I guess maybe leaving it up to his brother. That's why he left him the restaurant and the will and stuff. Plus now all this money of like, you figured out, you find the money and you do something better with it. So you keep this restaurant going. But I love Sid coming in to see them all like covered in sauce. I even love Richie being like, don't fucking just stand there, Sid. Get a can opener, open some of these cans of sauce. I think it's interesting too. There is one can left, which I'm like, the fact is they showed that they didn't open all of them. I'm like, is that still some money they're just sitting on that they don't realize? God, that can't just be like the 300 grand he owes Jimmy. That has to be more. So I'm wondering, is that going to be enough to kind of make a fresh start for the restaurant, but also pay off Jimmy so they never have to throw parties for him? Like, they can kind of finally get out of his debt. I'm not quite sure in that regard. He also did make up with Sydney too, where he was like, right, because he found a notebook she was writing like ideas and stuff down for her. And he's like, no acid. And she's like, what? He's like, your dish doesn't have any acid. She's like, okay, shove it up your ass. He's like, it was inappropriate. Like my behavior was terrible with the way I handled things. And she's like, correct. And he's like, your last check's here if you ever like, whenever you, if it is that you want to pick it up, and this would be the end of all the stuff between us. So. But being back, you know, her and Carmen had their back and forth because it's like, yeah, once again, bouncing those ideas back off of each other, what they want the restaurant to be. And obviously changing the name. It's no longer Beef, and they're saying goodbye to it, and now it's The Bear. I was like, very poetic. So I was like, that's interesting. I also love that Fak is going to be working there too. I love him being like, yeah, I saw you got stabbed, but it was also pretty badass how you just walked it off. And Rich is like, yeah, it was. It was pretty tight how I walked it off despite being stabbed. I even love that he was like, what, am I going to get my asshole sewn? And Ibra's like, well, I've sewn an asshole before. He's like, you have? It's like, yeah. So, yeah, it seems like everything's good. And I love the ending where we kind of have everyone together, including Pete and Sugar, and it just kind of like them all laughing and enjoying the spaghetti together, and then looking like towards like the kitchen or whatever, you see like Carmen staring off, and then like you see like Mikey turning back and smiling towards them. It's just, I think this is what they needed. They all kind of needed what Carmen needed, and I think whether he's fully like figured everything out, kind of dealt with everything, this kind of allowed him to start taking steps in the right direction. I think. Kind of alleviated kind of some of that pain that he's been dealing with. I think that's still going to be a thing going forward, but I think this is kind of a nice way to kind of cap off the season. Obviously, the show is coming back for another season. It's literally, the reason why I started watching the show is because I knew the new season was this month. It's next week. It's like next Wednesday or Thursday. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's Thursday, the 22nd, if my notes weren't wrong about that, not unless the date was something else or change or whatever, but it should just be the 22nd. So it is Thursday. So completely caught up and ready to watch the second season. I'm excited to see where the second season goes. There's a trailer out, but obviously it being less than a week away, I'm not going to bother watching it. So watching the trailer, but I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us, what kind of crazy situations and shenanigans kind of goes down next season. Specifically, like, how much of these threads are going to continue over, like, I mean, I'm sure, like, Richie's aggravated assault, I'm sure that's going to play a role or something, which I even love Tina being like, oh, my little felon. That might not be a major plot point or anything, but obviously, the restaurant running, what kind of, the ship seems like it's kind of in a good place, like I said, in the, Carmen and the whole crew, like, all taking steps in the right direction with this finale, so I'm curious to see what that looks like and what that means in the grand scheme of things for next season. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.